Coming to you from the Dendrology lab, we have Castanea dentata. So this is a species. I'm using Duncan Fraser's illustration of the tree. This is the best that I can do for getting to the leaves. And if you compare this to or Castanea mollissima, you'll see that the leaves are more strongly toothed on Castanea dentata. And the fruit is a nut, and I have a husk here. You might notice that compared to mollissima, it is a little bit, the spines on this, or I guess they're prickles on this nut husk, are actually a little bit finer and a little bit less blunt than Castanea mollissima. And then inside is a highly edible nut that is really important food for wildlife and was also a very important food for people for a long time. And so this species was a keystone species of the eastern forests. Emma Lucy Braun wrote about it extensively in the 1930s. And an introduced pest, the chestnut blight, was introduced into New York City in, I'm not going to remember the date right, but it was either 1910 or 1920. And it introduced a blight, which is a fungal blight that spread really rapidly throughout forests on the East Coast and killed all of the Castanea dentata. Interestingly, a connection I made last summer was I was up in the mountains, and the wood is very decay resistant, so it was a really important species in colonial times and before with indigenous people. So this rot resistant wood was maybe unfortunately salvage logged out of the forest as the trees succumbed to blight. And that decay resistant wood is used in a lot of the CCC projects that you see on the Blue Ridge Parkway and elsewhere. So a lot of those shelters and a lot of those fences were built from salvage logged Castanea dentata. So this is a really important species for wildlife because it had reliable hard mast. So the nuts, that means it produced the same level of nuts each year, very nutritious, very high in wildlife value. And it's actually thought that the carrying capacity of those southern Appalachian forests is reduced because so many of those, because that food source was gone. So the overall carrying capacity of those forests is less. So trying to think of anything else about Castanea dentata. You can still see and find some old buildings made of chestnut. It is highly prized, and this is a wood that people now will salvage. They'll take apart old barns because the wood is so lovely. But this is a keystone species in the southern Appalachians and generally in eastern forests. Today, the root systems are really extensive, and they store a lot of carbohydrate. So when the fungus lives on all species in Fagaceae, but it doesn't kill oak trees. So that means even though it's wiped out all of the chestnut trees, it is not gone from the forest. So it lives on the bark of oak trees. And so if there are chestnuts, right, they tend to resprout. And in fact, we've got a presence of American chestnut, Castanea dentata, but instead of the really tall, defect-free trees, like giant trees that we used to have, we now have stump sprouts, right? So these are small trees that sprout from those old root systems. And they will sprout repeatedly, but as soon as the tree gets old enough for the bark to start fissuring, the blight is able to get in, and the tree succumbs soon thereafter. I have seen some trees in the mountains that live to be old enough to fruit, so there's some hope that it could be perhaps some blight resistance. In the meantime, people have been working to figure out other ways to keep Castanea dentata, right, prized for its straight and beautiful tall trees. So it's been back-crossed with Castanea mollissima, the Chinese chestnut, which does have blight resistance, and they now have a 15/16 hybrid of American chestnut that is being outplanted and to see if that's a new direction to retain or reintroduced American chestnut. That is it's a little bit controversial. Another controversy is some folks at Syracuse. So all the back crossing has been done by the American Chestnut Foundation and universities associated with it. We've got some of those chestnuts outplanted at the Hill Forest, so you might be able to see them out there. Now, There's also been some work done at Syracuse University on GMO chestnuts where they insert a gene from the wheat plant that has fungal resistance. And so these are, in every other sense, American chestnut trees, but they have resistance to the blight. And so, as you might imagine, those are extremely controversial. A lot of people who are against GMOs in general are fearful that this is just a gateway GMO to get the tree out and start planting it out in nature. So that's what I've got for American chestnut. It's a truly beautiful tree, one that you should get to know and should look for. You can still find it growing in the mountains with those sharply serrate leaves and these spiny fruits and delicious nuts.